I'm Angela Walters, and tonight I want to draw your attention to a serious problem facing quilters today. Every year, hundreds, thousands of quilt tops are pieced with love and then folded up and put in a cabinet somewhere, and all they want is just to grow up to be a quilt. Will you help me save the quilt tops? Oh, I'm just kidding. But seriously, if you have quilt tops laying around that you want to finish up, then this is the episode for you. Well, my quilt top's finished and it's time for the machine quilting. No, you didn't miss anything. In this episode, we're getting right to the quilting. I know some of you may be a little teeny tiny nervous about machine quilting, but in this episode, I'm gonna get you excited and ready to finish your quilt tops. So I've got my adorable block-out quilt already made with this adorable whale fabric, so let's get to quilting. Here's the deal. If you have a lot of quilt tops laying around because you like to buy fabric and make them, then that's perfect, don't change a thing. But if you have quilt tops laying around because you're too scared to quilt them, let me encourage you to get them finished, because a finished quilt is always, always better than a perfect quilt top. But how do you get started? Well, that's what I'm gonna help you with right here. I've already basted my quilt sandwich and I'm ready to go. If you don't know how to do that, you can check out a bonus video that we have for you. Now, the first step into getting comfortable with machine quilting is starting off with a quilt that you don't have so much emotional attachment to. When you're learning how to quilt, it's best not to start with a quilt top that took forever and ever to finish. If you have a nice little quilt laying around that you can't wait to finish up, or if you want to make this quilt, you can buy the pattern and make that as well. But the main idea is we want to find a quilt that we can finish up. And it's even better if it's for a young one in your life because, hey, they all love quilts no matter what it looks like. To take my first stitches, I'm going to use my needle to bring up my bobbin thread. This isn't crucial, you could just go ahead and quilt, but it's going to keep me from getting one of those little nests on the back. I'm going to lower the needle down and up. What that's doing is grabbing the bobbin thread so that when I pull the quilt over and I grab onto that top thread, the bobbin thread comes out as well. Once I've pulled up my bobbin thread, I bring the quilt back into place. I'm gonna take a few stitches just to help kind of secure that. Now, I'm only the expert of my opinion, but this is how I like to secure my stitches. And then you're gonna press the pedal and start moving the quilt. So I know there's a few questions you might have. I will say that my feed dogs are dropped. I'm using a Supreme slider, which gives it a nice smooth surface. You don't have to have it. But ultimately what's happening is now my hands are guiding where this quilt is going, and that's kind of the scariest part when it comes to free motion quilting. Your brain knows what it wants you to do, but your hands just won't do it. So you're gonna use your hands to start moving it around. Now, when you start quilting, here's what I don't want you to worry about. Don't worry about the stitch length. Don't worry that it's perfect. We're just kind of getting comfortable with moving the fabric around, kind of getting comfortable with the play in between the speed of the machine and the movement of the hands. So if you have a cute little whale fabric like this, you can just kind of work your way around it to kind of get used to moving the quilt. Now here's what I do want you to focus on. I want you to focus on keeping your hands on either side of the needle. That's where you have the most control of your quilt. One of my bad habits is I tend to start quilting and my hands aren't where they need to be. I need to remember to reposition them. I want you to remember to breathe. That's important. Sometimes we think if we just hold our breath, look closer, it's gonna look fine, when actually the opposite is true. I want a nice loose movement. I'm gonna relax, maybe listen to an audiobook, maybe a glass of water, whatever helps you feel comfortable, and I'm just gonna keep moving on. This is not the time to judge how it's looking. This is just the time to get comfortable with moving the quilt around. And you can check out the class, the Startup Library, Quilting with Krista Watson, and she shows you everything you need to get started with piecing, machine quilting, all those. But I find that most quilters know what to do, they're just a little scared. So let's talk about some designs that are easy to help you maneuver your way around the area. As you're quilting, and as you feel comfortable moving around, what I want you to do is just start quilting a line that goes in all different directions, right? This is your basic meander. I want you to think about the reason you made the quilt, right? There's a purpose for your quilt top. It probably isn't to make yourself feel bad as a machine quilter. So whatever that reason is, I want you to think about that. If you're making the quilt for a charity, think about how much the recipient is going to appreciate that gift. If you're making it for yourself because you finally cut into that out-of-print fabric, think about how awesome it's going to be to have that quilt on your bed. I find that thinking about the purpose of your quilt kind of takes your mind away from the perfection of it. Because when your nose is this close to the quilt, you're going to see every little bobble. but trust me, when you're finished and you wash it up, it's gonna look great. When it comes to which designs you should practice, pick designs that you actually want to use on your quilt. One of my favorite ones when I want a soft, nice, easy design is a loopy meander. Okay, so to quilt the loopy meander, what I'm going to do is just quilt my meandering line or my little wiggly line, and then at a random point, I'm going to go right into my loop, and then continue on as though that loop hasn't happened. Keep continuing on and throwing in loops whenever I feel comfortable. Who knows, you might have a little bit more loops, you might be loopy like me, or you might just have a lot more wiggly lines. The idea is I want to get you comfortable with moving this quilt in all different directions. Now it might not feel like it at first, but as you start learning that design, it's going to get easier and easier to quilt it, and then you can start quilting variations. I think it's so much easier to learn 5 different ways to quilt one design than 5 completely different designs. So let's pretend that you're quilting and you love the loopy meander. You're thinking Angela is right, this is fun, it doesn't have to be perfect, yay. As you feel more and more comfortable with it, you could maybe add more loops, maybe more like figure 8s. Where I quilt my loops in one direction, clockwise, and then the other, counterclockwise. And you're gonna get just a slightly different look, a fun variation. But this is actually going to set you up for learning how to do pebbles later on down your quilting career. In fact, this is one of my favorite ways to teach quilting designs. Starting with a classic design and adding some fun variations, and at any point, if you're feeling nervous, you can just default back to your regular meander line. Here's the thing, if you're quilting along and you're not loving it, change it. It doesn't matter what you put in there, just get it all quilted so that you can enjoy the quilt. Now here's the thing, to eventually get better at machine quilting, you have to practice. I know, nobody likes hearing me say that, but there is a tip that can help you make your quilting look better, even if it's not. When you're quilting, if you pick a thread color that matches your quilt top, it's gonna cover a multitude of quilting sins. So on this quilt, I'm using an orange thread because I'm confident in my quilting ability. I love how the pop of color looks on it, but if I were not so comfortable, or I really didn't want the quilting to show, I would pick something that blended in a little bit more, like maybe a light gray or a light tan. The thread you pick can really make the quilting hide or highlight a particular area of your quilt. One thing you might not know, or maybe you've noticed, I get bored really easily, so I love switching up between designs. So if you're quilting on your quilt and you're thinking, I'm tired of that meander, how about a fun leafy meander? Meandering just means I'm working my way around a whole quilt, and a leafy meander just means I'm quilting a leaf all the way around the whole quilt. One of the things I love about machine quilting is that echoing will help you build up your designs. So if you want to try a leafy meander, all you have to do is quilt a pointy ovally shape like this, and then echo around it a couple of times. Another thing I love about echoing is it gives your brain a chance to catch up to what you're doing. You know, sometimes your hands outrun your brain, at least it does for me. So it kind of lets your, like, okay, I'm gonna echo this, I'm gonna get my breath back, I'm gonna try not to pee my pants, it's gonna be fine, and then go right into my next leaf. And if you can look at your quilt almost like a big grid, right? I have all these blocks and all these sashings. Sometimes it can be hard to know what to quilt where. Well, if you can break your quilt down into smaller pieces, that might make it more helpful. And Christina Camelli has a great class called Quilting on the Grid, where she shows you how to break down the quilt and come up with fun quilting options. The idea is just to pick a design and get going. So here's the thing, I've taught loads of classes, I've been a newbie quilter myself, I totally know what it feels like to not want to stop, right? You're quilting, you're like, I don't know where to go next. Just stop. When you're driving a car and you don't know where you're going, you don't speed up, right? You slow down. So as you're quilting, if you're not sure what to do next, just stop, breathe, that's a good time to breathe, and use your finger to trace out the next couple steps of the design. It's really gonna help your brain visualize what that design looks like, and it is so much easier to change your mind than it is to rip out quilting. So just take a breath and enjoy the process. Now, I can read your mind, I know what you're thinking. What happens if I quilt the whole quilt and I don't like how it turns out? Well, there's a chance that could happen. But when you get done, you'll have learned what not to do, which is just as important as knowing what to do. And when you're done, you'll have a finished quilt, something that you can use and it can be loved. So remember, a finished quilt is always, always, always better than a perfect quilt top. Well, I'm gonna keep quilting this thing. I'll see you when I'm done. I don't think I've ever had so much fun quilting a quilt. Getting to work my way around those adorable whales, changing designs, that bright pop of orange thread. And here's what I love the best. All the mistakes seem to fade away when you step back and look at the whole quilt. But remember, the best way to finish a quilt is to get started. So go quilt those quilt tops, and I'll see you next time on the Midnight Quilt Show. What are you still doing here? Go quilt your quilts.